conversations happening here in Nigeria, this time not necessarily in elections or in a tribunal, but with public relations. The Nigerian Institute of Public Relations, NIPR, has disclosed that the Special Advisor on Media and Publicity to President Bola Tinubu, Ajuri Ngelale, is not its certified member. Now, several members of the newly elected National Institute of Public Relations, NIPR Governing Council, have expressed their disapproval of the recent string of mistakes made by Ajuri Ngelale, the Special Advisor on Media and Publicity to President Bola Tinubu. According to council members, Ngelale, due to his lack of essential PR knowledge and training, does not possess the necessary qualifications for his high-ranking position within the Tinubu Presidency.
Now, the NIPR noted that the law establishing the NIPR makes it a criminal offense for any individual to practice public relations without the necessary certification and licensing. Now, public affairs commentator Babajide Benson is now joining us from Abuja to discuss the outcome of this particular situation. Of course, he has some interesting insights for us this morning. Babajide, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us on Breakfast Central.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
So just off the face of it, hearing that the president's spokesperson, one of the most visible members of the administration, may be committing a criminal act by, quote unquote, doing his job. Let's just start off the face of that. How does that strike you?
He has presidential immunity. Because if the president, who's supposed to be a symbol of the laws of the federation, has appointed someone who is not certified by law, then he's enabled the person to enjoy presidential immunity. However, I would hold the brief for the president that he has acted without the knowledge that Ajuri is not a member of the NIPR. He has hired Ajuri to that position on the basis of his previous engagement by the federal government. Now, I would also add that the president made a mistake in hiring a four-cylinder engine person to replace a V6 engine.
That's some strong words there. Okay, so I want to quickly follow up on something. That's the fact that with the NIPR code, we're hearing from the NIPR that it is a criminal offense. In the Constitution, many people are wondering, it's only the Constitution of a country that can dictate what is a criminal offense and what is not. So let's get into that criminal aspect of this. Is there a section, a part of the Constitution, a subsection that makes it illegal? Because hearing that it's criminal, many people are wondering, how have we all missed this part in Nigeria's Constitution?
Well, it's not exactly criminal, so I wouldn't hold brief for. I mean, I'm a member of the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations, but then it's not a constitutional matter. It is a function of the bylaws setting up the NIPR, the acts that set up NIPR. It should be Decree 16 of 1990. It's now an act of parliament. And it says that it will be wrong for anybody to be occupying the role of a public relations officer, presidential spokesman, special advisor, and anything of that sort to act in that capacity without being a member of the institute. It is on that basis that the NIPR has flagged this issue, and especially because Ajuri is now making serial gaffes, which is embarrassing not only the president, but the country in its entirety. So it's not so much about constitutionality. It's such that you cannot have somebody as Attorney General of the Federation who is not a member of Nigerian Bar Association. You cannot have a Minister of Health who is not a member of Nigerian Medical Association. So it is on that premise that the NIPR has raised this issue.
Yeah, well, they're going to keep going back and forth, because, just like Tolu Ogunlesi, responded yesterday, the Constitution, doesn't require, you to be a member of the, of the NIPR before the president can appoint you as a, as a media aide. The Constitution simply in Section 151 just says the president may appoint a person as a special advisor to assist him in the performance of his functions. It doesn't state what qualifications you must have. There's that part, but I want you to, go back to speaking about the, gaffes that, you've said that he has had. It started with the UAE issue and then the NASDAQ issue. Would you say that these are just innocent mistakes, or is the government running its engines on propaganda? And, in order to have that propaganda fly, you need to have somebody who is able to speak big English and you just carry the propaganda on his back. Is that what the current Nigerian government, is currently running with, or were there's just innocent mistakes?
There's actually a third point that you didn't mention, where Ajuri had told the world that President Tinubu was the only person that President Biden had scheduled to meet on the sidelines of the UNGA. So it's not just UAE and the Nasdaq. So it's a three-way cord, if you like. Yeah. So what I would say that maybe is that Ajuri is suffering from youthful exuberance or youthful verbal communication exuberance. Being too excited. He's acting like a kid in a candy shop, being too excited to always issue statements. And if he was a trained public relations professional, he will know that there's something called strategy and there's also something called tact. And there's a need to exercise restraints because having to apologize serially is embarrassing to him, to the president, and to the country altogether. And one should be worried that it's back-to-back propaganda. And then it also puts the Minister of Information in a bad situation because one of the first public statements that the Minister of Information said is that the era of running government information on propaganda has come to an end. For your information, the Minister of Information is a member of the NIPR. He's a fellow of the NIPR. He's a past chairman of a chapter of NIPR. So he knows better what should be done. But then he's in charge of government information machinery, not that of the president. So I think that it would be appropriate for him to step in at this time so that Ajuri would learn a thing or two from public communication.
So I want to follow up with that because you talked about the cost of these public gaffes as they may be. We know with Nigerians, it can be a battlefield on social media any day and time, and he has been facing it with the Nigerian Twitterati as it may be. But really in terms of diplomatic and international relations, about the front-facing, those who are the representatives of the government, and while we may separate him as a presidential spokesperson, outside he's just a spokesperson for Nigeria. So in terms of the cost, on the outside, we can battle whatever is happening inside. What are the costs of these sort of continuous gaffes, continuous errors or mistakes? Some might say very small as it may be. Some might say it's as big as an elephant. But what are the costs to Nigeria diplomatically and in terms of reputation?
Serious reputational damage because it means that some people always have to clean up after, a baby has messed up the situation, which in this case is Ajuri being the baby and other people work with him in the information machinery altogether having to issue statements. Now, let me give you an example. What happened at NASDAQ, he issued a statement and signed it. By the time they realized the error, they had to issue another statement, and it was simply signed off by State House Media. Then he wasn't proud to add his name to the sign-off. So those are some of the things that you consider. Now, when the UAE government was to issue a statement a few days after Ajuri's statement, it was completely silent on the discussions that had been had with the president and the leader of the UAE. So those are embarrassing situations. And don't forget, as they say, the internet never forgets. The moment you are saying something, they are fact checkers. It's as if there are some people that are on standby to hang you out to dry. And so that in itself should give you a reason to exercise restraint in everything you want to say or write. It's like when we're using WhatsApp, many of us forget to read our messages before we press the send button. Thankfully, that's one of the reasons why maybe WhatsApp has included the edit button. So now Ajuri is occupying an extra sensitive position. And therefore, he has to be extra careful. Don't forget that the president is not going to come out to correct what Ajuri has said. Ajuri is the one who will make a mistake and who will have to come back to retract. And if that happens once, it is understandable. But when it becomes the norm rather than the exception, then there's a cause for concern.
Okay.
Apologies. But once again, want to know from your perspective, because Ajuri is not a new face. It's not a new name. He did, of course, speak in the Buhari government. I remember that I also interviewed him a few times back then on radio. And it was pretty much the same thing, making these big statements, about how Nigeria is going to be generating 20,000, megawatts of electricity by this date, and how, so and so thousand kilometers of roads are going to be finished by the Buhari administration. It's just a lot of that. So can we excuse it as this is just the way he works, and he just creates these big pictures to favor, once again, like I said, propaganda. Is he a PR person or is he a propagandist? And is that the reason that he has been, put in the position that he currently is by the Tinubu administration?
As we advance in our careers, we have a responsibility again to be more restrained. That he got that role during President Bola. By the way, President Buhari's tenure is not one to be cited as an example for anything, which is one of the reasons why I said that President Tinubu should not have hired him just like that. Now, when he was working with President Buhari, he was senior special assistant or senior special assistant. Now he's occupying a higher role because now he's occupying the role that somebody like Mr. Dele Alake occupied, somebody like Dr. Ruben Abati occupied. And so what it means is that it's not just that you're a TV face, and it's not just that you're a journalist. It's not just that you have the gift of the gab. Anybody can talk, but there's tactical communication, there's strategic communications, which is where Ajuri is missing it. The 20,000 jobs that you refer to that he promised Nigerians would witness before the exit of President Buhari's government, please, where are they today? If anything, those 20,000 jobs, wherever they existed, must have been lost. So they did not create those jobs. More jobs were lost. So propaganda is not it. And as I said, the Minister of Communication is one of his first public statements as minister a few days after he was sworn in. He said categorically that the era of government information running on propaganda has come to an end. And that's an indication, an indictment of the person that occupied that office before him and the people that ran government machinery, government information machinery.
So I want to come back to the NIPR now because there's a newly sworn in board. They are making some of these comments, especially questioning his particular credentials in regards to the position he's holding now. But they point out that the law provides for imprisonment, fine, or even both. In fact, that the law that establishes the NIPR is also a law that makes it a criminal offense for anyone to practice public relations by whatever name without certification or license, and that they would soon start taking it very, very seriously. In fact, trying to ensure that organizations make sure that they do not run afoul of the law. So, Jide, how can they do this? Nigeria is a big, wide country. There are a lot of institutions. There are a lot of government spokespersons. We haven't even gotten to the governors as well and their spokespersons. We're here at the presidential level. So how do we get a situation where we have truly certified and professional individuals? Because regardless of how we might feel, they have a job to do. The president is not going to address Nigerians every day. Governors are not going to do that either. There's going to be a middleman, a third person who is that conduit for the information flow. So how does the NIPR step into this and ensure that we have credible and certified individuals maintaining and holding these very critical positions?
Okay, so the first thing is, thankfully, the institute now has a man who knows his onions. He has paid his dues. He has served in different capacities before he became president recently. So he's president and chairman of council, and he has the ears of the Minister of Information. So there has to be a joint approach between the institutes, the ministry, to be able to make representation to the presidency on matters like this. The situation is not going to be resolved by issuing threats, because like I said, Ajuri is enjoying presidential immunity. It's a criminal offense to be practicing public relations without being a member of the institute. So who's going to give the order for Ajuri to be arrested at this time? It's laughable. I'm sure you would agree with me. So one of the things that the institute will now have to do is to reach out to people who are occupying such roles to become members of the institute. Now, does the institute just need them to become members of the institute? The answer is no, because they also need the training to know what to say, how to say, what to write, how to write it. I mean, in public relations, and I know that you studied mass communication, at the elementary level, there's something called the 5 W's and H. So these people need to understand this thing. I mean, Ajuri has worked as a journalist. Fine, nobody's doubting that he has some experience in the industry, and that, again, like I said, he's blessed with the gift of the gab. But back to answer the question, what the institute needs to do is stakeholder engagement, because that's one of the fortes of public relations professionals. You reach out to the people who are working in public relations positions and they're not members of the institute. And of course, because they're code of ethics. And so what appears to be propaganda it violates the code of ethics of public relations. So if we were somebody who was not working in the presidency, maybe working in a private organization, it would be easy to sanction such people. But in this case, it's a case of who will bail the cat.
Yeah, well,
so conversations have to be continued and sustained. They need the ears of the president, and that can be reached through the Minister of Information.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're coming from a Femi Additional Garba Shehu to Lugunlesi era. Now we're in Ajuri Ngelale. And of course, you remember,
Yes.
Back then, of course, it was Ruben Abati. So you can basically tell the trajectory with which we're headed with regards to the president's spokesperson and its head of media. This is, how I, see it. The Tinubu, government for a long time, and of course the air around him and the people around him have really been run with propaganda for a long time. And so Ajuri Ngelale seems to be the best person to sell the government, even if it's not factual, but just sell the best face of the government, create these images on the international scale about how Nigeria is the best place to go and people are rushing from all over the world to Nigeria, which is not true. But we'll see, where all of these leads. Go ahead if you want to chip in something.
No, so I would say that, as I said, Ajuri could be acting out of excitement, youthful exuberance. He means well for his principal. He has to portray his principal in as best a way as possible. But all of this can be done without, telling a lie or using propaganda tactics. That the president rang a bell at NASDAQ was itself a good thing. So where he heard was where he said he's the first African leader to do that. I mean, the meeting in the United Arab Emirates was a fantastic high-level meeting. It was a class act in diplomacy. The meetings with the president, but especially because it was not originally on the president's itinerary, and I think that was a deft move. But coming out to issue a statement that Nigerians will begin to get visas to the UAE immediately and that aircrafts will begin to sign. No, it doesn't happen like that in any situation. Because there are foot soldiers who would have to do the legwork. The ministers of aviation of both countries would have to have conversations. The ministers of foreign affairs of both countries would have to have conversation. Even the ministers of finance of the central banks of both countries. Because don't forget that part of the reasons adduced for cessation of those flights was because they were not able to repatriate their monies, their foreign exchange. So the finance ministers or the CBN central bank governors of both countries will need to have conversations. So it's not something that's going to happen by executive fiat. It will take weeks, it could take months, but at least the work has started. That alone is worthy of celebration. But to come out and say, oh, without having to exchange any monies, immediately Nigerians will begin to fight. These are the things that people are flagging. On the face that the president made a detour on his way to Nigeria to UAE to meet with the king instantly. Fantastic PR enough. That the president was scheduled to meet the US president on the sidelines of UNGA was fantastic PR enough, especially because to borrow from the phrase, all eyes are on Chicago State University, yet the president of the US wanted to meet the president of Nigeria. That was fantastic on itself. I mean, see, there's PR that does not speak. It's palpable, but when you now start to add spice to it, it takes away from it.
Okay. Jide,
the president made a fantastic speech at the UN General Assembly. That could have been giving wings to fly. But you see, when little things like this start to come, it takes away from the real essence of what had happened.
So, Jide, I quickly want to sneak this in because we have to wrap up with you. And the question at this end is, does he resign or does he get replaced? Because if we say that this is an issue like this, it's also showing the government or the president in particular in a bad light. The NIPR is saying it's against the law. We don't want to see a president maintain a situation where he could clearly be flouting the Constitution. What is the right thing for Ajuri to do in this situation? Does he step down so he doesn't become a large stone around the neck of his president? Does he ride this wave and learn through it? What do you expect? This is a PR nightmare, so we're putting it to the PR experts.
Okay, so first of all, the institute has raised this again because of the issue, because of the errors that Ajuri has made. I mean, Ajuri didn't get appointed last week. He had been appointed for almost, 6 weeks now, and the institute never raised it. It's on account of these back-to-back errors that the institute is now flagging this. So number one, Ajuri is not going to resign. he should be cautioned, he should be restrained from making statements out of excitement. Because really, as I said, nobody can really call him to task. What the institute can do if he's not wanted in that position is to petition the president, citing relevant sections of the law. And as I said, using the access and the opportunity that the minister has to the president. As I said, the minister is a member of the institute and is a fellow and was a former chairman of a chapter. So those are the measures that the institute can take if Ajuri were to be asked to exit that position. But asking Ajuri to resign, I mean, I don't think that anybody's going to spit out honey. He's in a good position. One of the things that, as I said before, that I think is a mistake that the president made was to hire maybe a less experienced person to replace Mr. Dele Alake.
All right.
I mean,
So
and I should add that almost everybody who has occupied this position hasn't been a member of the institute. Femi Adesina that you cited, Dr. Ruben Abati that you cited, Garba Shehu, they've all been journalists. And again, it goes back to the point of working together and collaboration. So that means the Nigerian Union of Journalists or the Institute of Journalism enjoys more top of mind recall than the NIPR. And so that means there's a lot of work for us in the NIPR to do. And as I said, those are some of the steps that I think that the president is already taking. Dr. Ike Nelly Aku.
All right. Thank you so much, Babajide Benson, joining us from Abuja on